This episode is brought to you by Max. Get ready for fun this holiday season because it's beginning to look a lot like Barbie. Stream the biggest movie of the year now on Max. Stream it with your mom or your daughter, with your bestie or all of your friends. So gather around and spread some cheer because the holidays belong to Barbie. Barbie, now streaming exclusively on Max. Subscription required. Visit max.com.
When it comes to picking the perfect treats for your dog, Stewart makes the choice easy by keeping it real. Real ingredients, real nutrients, real benefits. Stewart dog treats are free from additives, corn, soy, wheat, and grains. Plus, they're freeze-dried to lock in all the great nutrition and natural flavor your furry friend deserves. Stewart freeze-dried dog treats. Big, tail-wagging nutritional benefits. Available on Amazon and Chewy. Learn more at stewartpet.com.
The DFS studio is brought to you by DraftKings. Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Welcome back, everyone. Friday, December 29th, it's Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni. I am joined, as always, by Matthew, taking 2023 out with a bang, Betz.
It's hard to believe, dude. We are here. We've made it to the end of 2023. And, you know, the year has gone, I think, pretty well for me personally, professionally, all these things. But the last week of the year, and I haven't gotten sick much this year. All of a sudden I wake up Tuesday morning, I'm like, oh no, it's happening. Now one of my daughters is getting sick, which means in probably 2 days, the next one will get sick as the other one feels better, which means very soon my wife will be getting sick. So it's going around the Betz household. So I apologize in advance if I sound a little under the weather. It's because I am. But you know what, Kyle, there's money to be made, so let's get to it.
All I heard is that you have a beta immune system. I thought you were more of like just an alpha guy.
No, I'm so soft. If I have the sniffles, it's like, man, how can I even work today? I need to take off at least a week.
It is funny whenever I get sick too. I clearly become the weakest human being on the planet, and I feel like my whole family crumbles just from like, okay, well, dad's out, then we can't really do much. So
cancel everything.
Yeah, I mean, I know. It's the end of 2023, and we are still here with you. We're still talking fantasy football. We're still talking DFS. We're still talking betting. Many said that they couldn't do it, that the NFL would fold. I was explaining this to my mother-in-law, explaining this to Emma. I was like, you know, the NFL's kind of a big deal. Like, I wasn't trying to say, like, I was just trying to explain, like, hey, on Christmas, this is what people watch. They watch football compared to all the other sports. Guys, we get to talk about a behemoth that in every single level, in the offseason, it'll be what? End of February. And the NFL will still have the headlines. It's a wild, wild sport. Like, I didn't think that I would be in a field. Like, I didn't go to school for fantasy football. Did you?
Obviously. Who didn't? Let's be real.
I went to the school of hard knocks, and I ended up a fantasy football talker. I don't really like the word analyst. Is that bad?
You're a fantasy football nerd. How about that?
I'm okay with that. I get to talk fantasy football with my friends for a profession on a podcast, and then also take it super seriously. And Football Guy takes, you and I do that, but also we don't take it so seriously that we can't laugh about it if we screw up or we get something wrong, because we're trying to forecast. So it's week 17. There's a lot we know about teams. And then there are certain things on a big slate. Betz, I was going through different matchups. I was like, oh, I love this player. This is a great matchup. And then I would pivot to a different team. I'm like, but then I can't play this guy. And it's like, there are so many players in this pool this week that I almost feel like in GPPs, I'm going to get lost.
You know what that means? I think it's time for yours truly to turn into a 150 bro this weekend. I'm going to run the optimizer because I had the same take when I was looking at the slate and kind of looking at pricing and different matchups. I was like, oh, this looks incredible. Like, how do you not play every 49er right on this slate? And then I'm like, man, the Eagles team applied total. How do you not play every Eagle? So it might be a slate where I actually go MME 150, which I never do, but there's so many good spots on the slate.
I think I might do that for the Saturday game because there are so many options. It's the best game of the week. So yeah, I agree. Maybe that's a good stance for somebody that hasn't played around with our optimizer yet. If there's ever a time to put in 150 lineups, and there are certain contests where you can do them on the cheap. There's ones on FanDuel where you can do them for a nickel each. So pay $7.50 for 150. Try out the optimizer. You can do that at dfspass.com. Be a part of our community, our Discord channels, DFS, our props alerts. I saw the other day that you were putting out a 76ers prop in basketball. You're such a homer.
It was an under, okay, and it hit. So as long as they're winning bets, Kyle, for the people, that they don't even pay for this. Like they literally did not, this was not on the description of what you get in the DFS pass. You didn't ask for it, but you're getting it. NBA player props in the DFS pass.
Yeah, and next year, I think you talked to corporate that you're going to have your own executive tier of the DFS pass that is just basketball and it's just alerts, and it's actually your private number. Like people are getting text you at any hour of the day.
Exactly, 24/7 access to my personal cell phone.
I would die if somebody is texting me advice for props around the clock. Anyway, I did want to give a shout out to a Discord member, Reverby. He says, by the way, I just want to thank you guys and let you know that I withdrew $2,000 I made this year, thanks to you guys in the props, to get Christmas gifts for the family, which included some cruise tickets. So thanks everybody for your hard work. And I loved your response, Betz, because you were just saying like what a crazy world that we live in when it comes to props and how it can benefit other people.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. We're taking a Van Jefferson under most weeks this year. So like this loyal listener and DFS Pass member is taking his family on a vacation because Van Jefferson can't earn targets. What a world we live in, Kyle. I mean, this is wild. But shout out to him. Shout out to everyone else that's done well this year in the props. And I keep mentioning this like on our Tuesday recaps, but sometimes people in there are talking about different plays that weren't even on my radar. And then someone brings it up. I look, do the research. I'm like, that's a great bet. Let's take it. So it's a great community. I think people in there are really having a lot of fun.
Yep. So dfspass.com. We're going to be giving props through the playoffs. So if you're like, hey, I've got a little cash, maybe you got a little bonus, maybe it's the beginning of the year and you want to start some habits, no better habit than gambling with your friends for fake sports, right?
You want to start a new degenerate habit. This is where we could do it together. Waste your Christmas bonus, not on your family, but on fake sports.
What are your goals for 2024? I want to hang out with my online friends and take the under on Van Jefferson again.
Oh man. Hey, we only have 2 more weeks to do that. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Also, go to footclanvote.com right now, whatever browser you're using, Internet Explorer, AOL, Netscape, whatever you're doing, footclanvote.com, and you can vote for this podcast. Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. We're up for this, and we'll remind you a couple more times through the playoffs, but I really want to take this one home. I really feel like Betz and I would like to be able to show corporate, HR even, that, hey, maybe this podcast actually matters, that it's moving the needle, but I think you guys get a lot of value out of it. So that would be really helpful for us, footclanvote.com, and we'll get into our cash picks.
Straight cash, homie.
You guys know this segment by now. Every single week, we get to walk through our favorite picks in cash. And just remember, you got to mix and match and look at projections. I want to recommend that if you are someone that's like, hey, I don't really know where to go when you talk about projections, in the DFS Pass, we have our DraftKings rankings where you can sort by points per dollar, which is definitely one of my favorite places to say, oh, here's a running back that has a ton of opportunities based on his salary that stands out. Same thing with wide receivers. I do that every week. And then you can actually put those projections together. Start your own spreadsheet. There's also people in our Discord channel that all the time are saying, hey, I use this template. You can use this for free. So make sure you are putting these all together, because at quarterback this week, I am seeing 3 tiers of players that you could use in cash. I see Jalen Hurts at 8.3, Brock Purdy at 7K in a great matchup we'll talk about. And then there are the cheapies this week that when you and I talked on Tuesday, we're like, I don't know if you can really go there. But now we have a plethora of options that I think the field will actually go there somewhat, so you can insulate some of those losses. So that's Jacoby Brissett at 4.9, Jarrett Stidham 4.8, and Tyrod Taylor at 4.6. Also, what year is this that we are talking about those players? What year is it?
It's week 17. That's what's happening, Kyle. Every year we get to the end of the season, it's like, man, madness is ensuing. Look, dude, there's really nothing to say about Brock Purdy or Jalen Hurts. There's just in unbelievable spots. Jalen Hurts is 8,300 on DraftKings. It's the Cardinals. You're probably getting a rushing touchdown, at least one, and he's going to carve them up through the air. They can't rush the passer. It's such a clean matchup, right? And I know that you talked about that in pace of like, hey, yeah, the Eagles offense has kind of sputtered recently. Vegas has their team total extremely high this week, higher than it's been in a very long time. So like they're on the Eagles offense in this spot. He's great. It's just a matter of how do you want to build, right? Pricing. Do you drop down to Brock Purdy? It's the Commanders. He's going to crush. We know that, obviously, right? So like those two guys look awesome at the top. But then I was looking at teams, man, and I was like, okay, I want to play CMC. How do I fit Tyreek? Kyren Williams looks awesome. I think it's viable if you wanted to drop down into that cheap range. Now, we'll, I guess, kind of talk this through together. I like Tyrod the best. What are your thoughts on him versus Stidham or Jacoby Brissett?
Tyrod's going to have to throw. Tyrod also scares me based on his weapons. If they can't run the ball, and let's be honest, the Rams are a great rush defense. Saquon has some absolute dud games. I think he has the lowest floor. Is that like, maybe I'm looking at it differently?
I think Stidham has the lowest floor if Sutton doesn't clear protocol, personally. I think Jacoby Brissett's fine as well. The issue with these guys is that, like you said, it's a scary proposition to play one of them in cash if Hurts and or Brock Purdy go for 25 points each, or Hurts goes for 30, right? Because Hurts is going to be played by the field. So I don't know which way I'm leaning. Like I said, I like Tyrod just because he's the cheapest of him versus Jacoby Brissett. In his 2 games started, he's rushed for 25 and 33 yards. So I feel like you're probably getting somewhere in the range of 25 to 40 yards rushing. And you have to throw on the Rams. And in his starts, he's completing 65% of his passes. 7.4 YPA is solid. It's not incredible, but it's solid. Waller's getting healthier. Wandale's getting healthier. I think it's okay, but man, it is terrifying.
So I lean Brissett. That's where I'm at right now because I think you're going to get more passing volume. There was money that came in on Washington.
Yeah. And
that total was bet up to 50. So I just like that game environment more. And I know like San Francisco's a defense that you're just going to have to throw. They will abandon the run. They have no running backs left. If Brian Robinson doesn't play, it's just Gibson. And they do give up a ton of receptions to running backs too. So I think Brissett has played really well the last 2 weeks in a small sample size. It's a $300 difference. So I think I lean him. And I played around with lineups where if I get Brissett, I can get in 2 stud running backs and a stud wide receiver. So I'm just a little bit further. I get Tyrod. I totally understand. But yeah, as of right now, I haven't made up my mind this week. I usually come on this podcast and say something to the effect of, I want to feel alive. I'm going to play Jacoby Brissett. But I also would like to make money on my lineups.
Fair. Very fair assessment. What about on FanDuel? It's a very different conversation, I think.
On FanDuel, when I was putting together my cash pool, I just liked Hurts. I just think he's in a safe spot.
Him or Lamar. I mean, I don't think you need to save the money like you do on DraftKings. I don't think you have to. I should say that on DraftKings. I think you can on DraftKings. But on FanDuel, pay up. Lamar or Jalen Hurts look awesome. So much of your score comes from quarterback production over there that I want one of the 2 studs. So I think it's a very different conversation depending on where you play for cash games. But it's a tough slate, man. I don't have a strong lean on what is right as of our recording.
Do we have any info just to speak about Lamar? And then I know we'll talk about Zay Flowers because he has a great price. He did not practice on Thursday with a calf injury. Is that one of those things where you're just going to monitor and, Zay and Lamar look like good plays at home, but not great plays?
Was that today you didn't see him on the field?
Correct.
Yeah, that's 2 in a row. That makes a big difference to me. If Zay Flowers is out, I don't think Lamar Jackson is as strong of a play, obviously, if he would have been otherwise. So that's a key to monitor. If Zay Flowers is out, I think on FanDuel, it is an easy conversation point that you just pivot to right away to Jalen Hurts and move on.
At running back, CMC and Kyren, I want to jam both of them in my lineup, and I think it is possible to do that this week, but I also feel like that's been a strategy for like 3 or 4 weeks in a row where I want to play both those guys. So CMC is 9.6. It's expensive. Kyren is awesome. His role is maybe, in some weeks it feels like he's even better than CMC because you can look at what the 49ers are going to do. It's like Debo could have 2 touchdowns. Kittle could have 2 touchdowns. Kyren feels like he's a guarantee for 25 plus opportunities, and this matchup is awesome against the Giants. So at $1,300 cheaper, do you have a preference between Kyren and CMC?
Honestly, I don't, because they're both incredible. And even when you account for the salary difference, I still think it's like a 1A, 1B between CMC and Kyren. The savings matter, but man, this spot is just literally unreal for Christian McCaffrey. They've allowed Washington has 7 straight running backs to go for over 100 scrimmage yards and at least 1 touchdown. How do you not play him in cash? That's where I'm at right now with CMC.
That is music to my ears in a home league title with Christian McCaffrey.
Me too.
I just...
we need you. Take us home.
He's been so good this year. So consistent, so good every single week. Gosh, he's amazing. So CMC and Kyren are our top 2 running backs, and they're priced that way. So you might be like, who cares? You guys, that's the dumbest analysis I've ever heard. But we're saying we want to pay up because you can pay down if you want to do a 3 running back build this week with either CEH, who, if I'm not mistaken, he missed practice on Thursday with an illness.
Correct. Yes. He did not practice because of illness.
Diarrhea?
I don't know what it is. Me and CEH, both of us, illness. But I'm here at work. He couldn't even get there.
Couldn't show up to his job.
He did not practice. Jerick McKinnon is on IR with a groin injury, groinindex.com. And Pacheco didn't practice again because of his concussion. So
who's their 4th string?
It is LaMichael Pirine. And the 5th/6th string running back is a favorite of the Dynasty show, Keontae Ingram.
A favorite of you.
A favorite of no one. He's on the practice squad. So legitimately, this is the decision point on the slate, I think, is how this opens up, because Pirine is very cheap. And if Edwards-Helaire and or Pacheco don't play, I think you just take the savings and move on. If CEH is in, I think you take the savings and move on. He's 5,300. Take on the Bengals. They are giving up a ton to running backs, 25th when you adjust for schedule over the last 6 weeks. The Chiefs have one of the highest team implied totals on the slate. They're at home. And when you combine McKinnon and Pacheco's usage in the passing game over the last about 5 weeks, it's a 20% target share for Pat Mahomes. So I think he's getting that. And so for that reason, I think CEH is one of the best running back plays on the slate if he's healthy when you adjust for salary.
I love Zamir White at 5.1 if Josh Jacobs is out. He was out Wednesday with a quad injury, and I think we're still waiting practice reports. But last 2 weeks, 21, 23 opportunities. Indianapolis defense has allowed a top 12 finish to running backs in 12 straight games. I mean, they were just getting destroyed. And I looked up the stat. Aiden O'Connell just doesn't want to throw the football, in case you didn't know. Here are his 4th quarter passing yards in the last 3 games. 7, 6, and 0.
That is so wild, dude.
Dude, it was going through the game logs, and I was like, okay, so I know that they had that Minnesota game where it was 3-0. Then they blew out the Chargers, and then they beat the Chiefs. It was a great game. But they're not asking this guy to win. They're relying on the running game and then the Colts are the matchup. So I would be totally fine with a 3 running back build this week. CMC, Kyren, and then 1 cheapie, and Zamir White's my favorite. But I do want to mention DeAndre Swift's in a great spot. We'll talk about that game. 6.5. It's just really clean against the Cardinals. And then Zeke, the workload's great. He's getting a ton of receptions. He's only 6K. He's going to show up really well. Anything you want to say about those guys?
We'll talk about that game when we get to it for the Philly game. Unreal matchup for the running game from Philly, so I love Swift for tournaments. Dude, Zeke, this is so wild to me. Week 17, the year 2023, Zeke is just looking athletic as ever, getting to the goal line, scoring touchdowns. Tony Pollard, wide open lane to that end zone, can't fall in the end zone to save his life. What has happened this year in fantasy football? Who knows, man. But yeah, Zeke's solid. I just don't think you need to go there for cash because the other options are a little bit stronger.
I wish you were listening when I was telling you, Betz, Ezekiel Elliott, he is a way better pick than,
he's going to be what you need in the best ball playoffs.
Yes, for sure. Think about when we were doing best ball previews, May, June, July, Zeke didn't have a team, and we were just like, I'm not drafting this guy. He's dust. He's going to go somewhere as a backup. Well, he's apparently pretty important. He's what you needed to take down a tournament in best ball. So those are our guys on FanDuel. I mentioned Zamir White's also cheap at 6.1 CEH. I think 3 running back builds are going to make a lot of sense because there's not a lot of cheap wide receivers this week. I'm looking at the guys that I wrote down. I hated that I wrote down Jonathan Mingo again.
No.
He is the
nope.
He's been priced the exact same for a year, and every time I've ever played him, I've hated myself.
Yeah, it's because he's terrible.
Is he?
It's just, you pause as if that wasn't an okay statement. Look, the situation is not great with a rookie quarterback who struggled, but any advanced metric you look at, it has been so bad. He is out there with Van Jefferson of the world. ESPN's open score, they charted 139 pass catchers so far this year. He is 137th in open score, according to ESPN, and bottom 5 in yards per route run. So he quite literally is running around out there doing nothing. The field keeps playing him. Keep fading him. I would not play Jonathan Mingo.
It's weird that they keep benching. They have an inactive wide receiver that they're not playing named Terrace Marshall Jr. that they just don't want to put in. I don't know why. Imagine spending second round picks on wide receivers that stink. Go Panthers.
Couldn't be me.
So there's no cheap guys that stand out. DJ Chark, 2 touchdowns last week. I'm not chasing that. Cedric Wilson might be a play that people look at. It's Waddle's out. He's 3.6. That feels rough too. If you just wanted to punt it off. The cheap guys are really in the 4K range. Wandale at 4K. Pop Douglas, who we've talked about for 2 months straight and gives you the exact same line. And Curtis Samuel at 4.4. This range of player, I whenever I do matchup previews for the main show, I go back to these players they're the exact same guy. Elijah Moore, Josh Downs, Pop Douglas, Wandale Robinson. I know exactly what they're going to give me. They're going to give me 4 for 41 or something. Maybe even 4 for 20.
Kyle, that's okay, dude. That's all right.
I want more.
Who gives you 0? Jonathan Mingo. I think they're fine. And like you said, there's nothing exciting about these guys as far as their upside, which is why I think getting off them in tournaments makes so much sense. But in cash, we need to save money to get to Tyreek or CMC or Kyren or all of them or whoever you want. So you have to play one of these guys, in my opinion. I think I lean Curtis Samuel if I was forced to choose one, and then I would say Pop Douglas because those 2 guys at least are earning targets at a pretty high rate. We expect the pass rate for the Commanders to absolutely be there. Teams are throwing on the Niners. You have to do it. And they've actually given up a ton of production to slot wide receivers. 5th most this year has San Francisco to the slot. And Samuel very quietly has had 4+ catches in 8 of his last 11 games. So that's solid, right? If he gives you 4 or 5 catches in cash, you're probably okay. But like I said, in tournaments, these guys are something that I would probably consider fading.
No, I'm hearing you. Jacoby Brissett, Curtis Samuel stack for week 17 for the win in cash.
For the Millie, actually.
Oh, can I give you some wide receivers that are a little bit better, that are priced up a little bit more, like Chris Olave at 6.8 on DraftKings, 7.4 on FanDuel is a great tag as well. What do we know about him in terms of practice reports?
So he's back limited, which is good. I thought they might have him as a DMP early in the week, but he was limited to start, which is an awesome sign coming out of the Thursday night game from last week. I think he's an incredible play. The matchup is just perfect. Taking on Tampa, you have to throw on Tampa. Derek Carr has been pushing the ball down the field a little bit more recently. So, yeah, it all lines up. I think Olave is a smash play this week.
I love Chris Olave. Just be great. Be great this week. It terrifies me that it comes down to Derek Carr, because Derek Carr could go for 303, or he could actually go for 200 3 turnovers. I hate that there's that range of outcomes. So Tyreek is probably the spend up option that we like the most, 9.3. If Waddle's out, The volume's going to be unreal. You know the upside's there. Any other names you want to mention at wide receiver?
I'll throw out Rashee Rice. I think he's very solid in the mid-range. I know that the box score on Monday on Christmas wasn't awesome. He still saw 12 targets. And if you actually look over the last, 5 or so weeks, since week 12, he's third among all NFL wide receivers in targets. Like, he's getting a ton of volume. So even at that tag, I think it's a good spot here. Obviously, the Bengals are a beatable matchup. They don't trust anyone else in the wide receiver room, right? It's Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce, and whoever else. And now we have both running backs dealing with injury or illness. So Rashee Rice makes so much sense to me.
At tight end, we're going to talk about Trey McBride because we're contractually obligated to talk about their wide receiver one. At 5.9, he's a wide receiver. George Kittle is also a great tag this week at 5.6 on DraftKings. Those are the good spend-up options. And then there's some guys in the 3K range we mentioned. Gerald Everett at 3.5. Juwan Johnson's more of a tournament play at 3.4. I think he's interesting. Chig's kind of interesting as well, but I think Gerald Everett just feels safer. Safe is relative in the tight end world, but at 3.5, he's fine. And then I want to bring up Dalton Schultz. He feels like kind of like a lost player at 4.3. Saw 11 targets last week. CJ Stroud did practice on Thursday, so I think he's a solid play. Him and Nico Collins, I think, are interesting more for tournaments this week because I think people are going to be off the Texans. We haven't played them in a couple weeks, but he's interesting. And then a defense, let's just mention the Broncos and move on.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess you could play the Texans if you wanted to spend $100 more, but I think the Broncos are probably the better play. You save $100, they're at home, taking on Easton Stick, who will probably be without Keenan Allen again, and Josh Palmer is in concussion protocol. So, makes sense to me.
Yep. No, Keenan doesn't want to show up to work anymore. It's fine. He'll figure it out in 2024. It's fine. I don't need him. I have never, ever needed him. Let's take a quick break.
When it comes to picking the perfect treats for your dog, Stewart makes the choice easy by keeping it real. Real ingredients, real nutrients, real benefits. Stewart dog treats are free from additives, corn, soy, wheat, and grains. Plus, they're freeze-dried to lock in all the great nutrition and natural flavor your furry friend deserves. Stewart freeze-dried dog treats. Big, tail-wagging nutritional benefits. Available on Amazon and Chewy. Learn more at stewartpet.com.
Betz and I are going to preview 4 games this week because there's been a couple games that bet up, and I think that these are the ones that you'll need to take down a tournament. So let's talk about them.
Stack Attack.
First game, San Francisco 49ers at the Washington Commanders. The over-under is now at 50, which is great. It was bet up from 48.5 earlier in the week. San Francisco is a 12.5 point road favorite, and that gives San Francisco a 31.3 team implied total, which is juicy. Washington, we know what their games are like. Their defense is really, really bad. 5th most plays per game. They're 32nd, their defense is, in points per play, 30th in yards per play. I mean, any of the top options for the 49ers, you look at them and you can go, okay, I could see them being the key to the slate. And that's, to me, what's the hardest part about picking 49ers. We know about Christian McCaffrey, but Debo could have 2 touchdowns. Ayuk is always a candidate to go over 100 yards. We know Kittle can break a slate too. So how are you handling the 49ers side knowing it's expensive and they have the highest team implied total?
Yeah, that's the key, right? Is that team applied total. We already talked on Tuesday. We like the over on that. So when I run my 150 this weekend, I might set a rule to include a Niner in every single lineup. And that's not hyperbole. I just think there's such a strong chance this team is heard from on this slate, even on a 13-game slate. Don't you think one of these guys has a huge day? So we love them. The tricky thing is, like you said, it could be any of them. To me, if I am going to pick, obviously it's CMC for the reasons we mentioned in cash, but I think it's actually a Debo spot relative to Ayuk. And I've been a pretty big Ayuk guy. I just think when you look at the change that has happened for Washington since they changed defensive coordinators, they're running a ton of too high. And you've talked about this a lot with the coverage matchups, that's kind of a Debo thing. He just crushes too high looks that defenses throw at them. So if that happens, he should be heavily involved here, and we should see a lot of efficiency. So whether it's Debo and CMC without Purdy, if you want to look elsewhere for a cheap quarterback, or just play that double stack, the answer to me is yes on this slate. And I think those are my two favorites. I'm a little lower on Kittle this week, I think. If there is one area where Washington has been pretty good, it is against the tight end. They are fifth in adjusted points allowed to the position over the last 6 weeks. So in theory, that's their one strength, but it wouldn't be surprising if Kittle smashed, obviously, right? So my strongest takes are CMC and Debo, probably a little underweight on Kittle.
I look at this 49ers team on FanDuel, we talked about it on Tuesday, but it seems like FanDuel priced them as if they won that game already because they had to put out the prices before. So they're expensive on FanDuel. $11K for CMC, 8.5 for Purdy. That's the QB3. Debo is the wide receiver 2 at 8.8. So I find them a little cost prohibitive on FanDuel. Although it is a touchdown-centric site, I worry about this game and if you have enough salary to pay up at other spots. So I like this more on DraftKings. I think if I would play it, I would just pick two pieces from the San Francisco side and say I'm playing CMC and Ayuk, or I'm playing Debo and Purdy and just stacking them together and then figuring out who on the Washington side to bring it back with. I like Purdy. I think his floor is super high. I found this stat. He's 228 passing yards away from breaking the 49ers single season record. So there's incentive. There's incentive also because this team wants to lock up the 1 seed and Washington's just a bad defense. So yeah, I don't think we need to talk about the 49ers anymore. They're just awesome. It's more of figuring out the combinations and where you want to go with your boy Beef Brissett.
Oh, the beef. Real quick, I will just say on DraftKings, I like the point that you made about FanDuel with them. That was one thing I forgot to mention, that this is more of a DraftKings strong take for me, that they're just underpriced over there relative to FanDuel. So I'm glad you pointed that out. On the Washington side, man, it's tough. It's kind of the same conversation. You know that there's going to be attempts and volume. It's just where is it going? Credit to John Daigle from 4for4. He put this out that in throws from Jacoby Brissett, Terry McLaurin has about a 23% target share. Dotson and Samuel tied at 18%. Logan Thomas at 13.5%. So it's very flat, which really makes things difficult. I think Curtis Samuel is solid for cash, like we talked about. But if he is going to be popular, I think pivoting to McLaurin makes a lot of sense to me in this matchup.
Yeah, I just don't I don't even know if you need a Washington. I just think that there's enough volume to be able to lean into it. Like, that's the only reason that I kind of like Commanders. We've had weeks with Sam Howell. We're like, oh, this team, they're right there. But then we just faded the team because it wasn't really, enough there. Like, I look at their splits. Jahan Dotson, I don't know why, but he's like allergic to zone coverage. And that's what most of the NFL has been playing. So his yards per out run doesn't look good. Samuel, you need to get in the end zone. And he had 2 touchdowns a couple weeks ago, but like those are so hard to predict. So I don't know. Do you have a lean? Like I like McLaurin's price on DraftKings. 5,500 is pretty cheap considering he's their wide receiver 1. Samuel, those are probably the only 2 I'm going to go to though. Yeah,
same. I've lost an unreal amount of money playing Deshaun Dotson this year. So I think I'm done, man. I'll be honest. But McLaurin, to me, is a very solid play. Right now, I'm seeing about 6% in the early runs for the optimizer. That's a really strong GPP play. If you think that Washington pushes back here a little bit, you said already the money came in on the over and on Washington here when you talk about the spread. So makes sense to me as a pivot off of Curtis Samuel.
All right, in this game, I will take San Francisco and the points. I know it's a lot, 12.5, but I cannot see this Washington. Total's at 50, 12.5 is the spread right now.
All right, let me just run the model real quick. I'll take under.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And what's crazy is it's at 50. San Francisco could hit their team implied total, hit 35 points, and Washington doesn't get to 15.
It's possible.
Next game we're going to talk about is probably the most important NFL game of the week. Miami Dolphins at the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens are 3.5-point home favorites. It's a 47 over-under. I have concerns about this game from a DFS stacking perspective. I love that the Ravens are cheaper than you think. that you can stack them up. And with Lamar, like on both sites, like I can play Lamar and I can play Lamar with one option and then bring it back with Tyreek on the other side and just get out of here. But I worry about the overall play volume and I worry about Tua on the road against this Baltimore front. So do you think that I'm maybe a little too hyperbolic of writing this game off?
I don't think that's hyperbolic. I just think like on a slate where, you know, it's different because on like a 9-game slate or a 10-game slate, there's not as many options where you can find good leverage points. On a 13-game slate, you certainly can. And if you want to come in underweight this game, I think it's totally viable. I like what you brought up in your pace of play article, just talking about like Miami does not want to play fast. They want to be methodical and hit you with big plays, but they need Tua to be kept clean to do that. And now you have likely no Jalen Waddle, a kind of offensive line that's just pieced together with a ton of injuries, and a Ravens team that can sack the quarterback. We saw that with Brock Purdy on Christmas night. So I do see the downside here for the Miami Dolphins side of things, that I probably will be underweight this as far as a total game stack relative to the field. Don't get me wrong. I want to have exposure to Tyreek in a game without Jalen Waddle where he could literally see 17 targets. I mean, don't you think his floor is like 12 targets in this game if he stays healthy?
Yes, if he's healthy, they're just going to design everything for him.
Right. So I want at least a little exposure to him, but I'm with you. As far as getting into like a full 3 or 4 pieces from this game, I personally don't see it.
I like stacking Lamar with Zay, or I think Isaiah Likely is a great spot this week. He's cheap. Dallas Titans saw 11 targets last week, so it's a spot that against them you can definitely go for. So yeah, it's just a skinny Lamar stack, hoping that he gets there on the ground and it's something valuable. But I just worry about Tua. I will say that we have seen a game where Tua has played at Baltimore. It was last year where we coined the Tua double stacks phrase that won a ton of money for our people. And Tua went 36 of 50 for 469 yards and 6 touchdowns. So all of this poo-pooing I'm doing on Tua saying, hey, the pressure's not going to be good. Like, there's reasons to like him, but I brought this up is that when Tua's been under pressure this year, it's 24% of his dropbacks. His QB rating, his completion percentage is like bottom 5 in the league. They just get rid of the ball so fast. And so he hasn't been pressured as much. We know what this Baltimore front can do. They're top 5 in almost every single pressure-related statistics on defense. So I just wonder if the Miami offensive line can give him enough time. So, are you stacking Tua at all?
I don't think so. It's always scary to not play a Tua stack because we've seen what they can do. But it's been a while. It's been a while since Tua's really had that ceiling game that you're like, man, I wish I had him in a tournament, right? Since the Week 10 bye, he's averaging just over 260 yards and 1.2 passing touchdowns per game. So, I don't know, man. It just doesn't feel like the best spot that there's so many other strong plays. We've talked about Hurts. I could see Josh Allen having an incredible game. There's some cheap options that are projecting very well. Brock Purdy, that to me, he's not going to be a priority on this slate. I could see it coming back to burn me, but you have to take a stand somewhere, and that's probably where I'll be.
The craziest part about Tua, and then I'll add this with Dak, is if you go through their game logs, you're like, their highs were so high that that's mostly what sticks with your brain in DFS, but they've been pretty mediocre. Like, I think Dak has like 5 good games this year. That's it. And then the rest have been terrible to mediocre. And the same thing with Tua. Like, you haven't seen a 3 touchdown game since week 8. You've only seen 4 games where he's hit over 300 yards.
Right.
So on DraftKings, I think it's tough to pay that price when there are other guys that we think on this slate can do it. So any interest in the Miami running backs, I'm always open to playing them because of the touchdown equity for Raheem Mostert, and Achane can break any slate if he gets the receiving work.
Yeah, it's tough. I thought last week Achane was going to see a little bit more work and they kind of would unleash him. It didn't really. So it's hard to say what the split's going to look like. I think if you're betting on one guy to break a huge play, obviously that's Achane, but every week I play him, and Raheem Mostert waltzes into the end zone for 2 touchdowns. So I don't know, man. It's not a clean spot. It's a pretty tough matchup, obviously. But I will say recently, like over the last 6 or 7 weeks, Baltimore has been a little bit more susceptible to the run than they have been early and last year when they were so dominant. So I think one of these guys can get there. Who it's going to be, I wish I could tell you.
Yeah, you need a negative game script for Achane to get 5-6 targets, something like that he just is involved in. Last week, my Millie Maker roster that I was doing, at the very end, I was hand building it. It was between Breece Hall and Achane. I spent up at Achane. I guessed wrong because apparently Breece Hall went for 42 points. So, any last thoughts on this game?
What are you doing with the other guys? Let's say Zay Flowers does not play.
That is the exact perfect point.
Are you in on OBJ or Rashad Bateman?
I can't play Bateman, man. He's not on the field. Like, Aguilar has been a more effective player on a yards per out run basis. Like, he's just been better.
So Aguilar is the key to the slate. Got it.
Dude, Aguilar shows up in the weirdest times. You know, like, he's one of the weirder players. OBJ's fine as a dart throw, 4,500, but overall, I probably will be underweight on this game.
Yep, I agree. And I don't think you can go to the running backs. Miami has just been so dominant against the run, and Lamar is stealing a lot of the rushing work since the Keaton Mitchell injury.
I will take the under of this game.
I like Baltimore, -3.5. I also like the under.
Yep. All right, next game, Arizona Cardinals at your Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles are 11-point home favorites. Over-under is 48.5. And this is their highest team implied total of the year at 29.8 points. The only reason that the Eagles are given almost 30 points here is because of the Cardinals, because they have not earned that. They haven't covered the spread in 4 games in a row, but this is the smash spot. Like, this is, if there's ever a spot where the Eagles are going to show up, put up 30 points, it's at home against the Cardinals, who are the worst defense. So how do you want to stack up the Eagles side?
Yeah, similar to the Niners, the answer is yes. Again, I think it's very, very likely someone on this team is a key piece in not only, if you wanted to play cash games, but also tournament lineups. Like you said, it's such a clean spot, and whenever the market tells us that it is going to be likely that they're going to have that type of performance, I want to bet on that. So, like you said, the offense, the team has kind of struggled recently, but Vegas says we want them to score 30. We think they will. So I think, again, you're going to hear from Eagles and GPPs. To me, the best pivot in this spot is DeAndre Swift, because Jalen Hurts, who I'm not going to say anything negative about, obviously, is going to be a cash game quarterback that people will play. So naturally, you'll probably see some A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith elevated roster percentages come up as people play Jalen Hurts stacks. We just need Swift to not get tackled at the 1-yard line. This is the cleanest spot on paper for him. The Cardinals are getting gashed in the run. Swift has been, more electric and getting opportunities when he's been in a positive game script. There should be that. So I want to be overweight the field this week on DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, just to put some numbers to it, Arizona's on pace to face the 4th most rushing attempts over the last decade. So almost 32 attempts per game. Teams are running the ball. So I think DeAndre Swift is a great play. I almost, though, made A.J. Brown / Devonta Smith, just to get both names in there, my slate breakers. Almost. So what does that mean by me saying almost?
That means they're going to go off and you'll take credit for it.
That's exactly it. So A.J. Brown hasn't scored since week 12. You know that there's a safe floor. He has 5 receptions in 12 of his last 13 games. And I think this spot sets up really well, not just for the run game, but Arizona's pass defense is abysmal. And the way that they play defense is abysmal, which is just hilarious, thinking that this is a Jonathan Gannon defense now playing the Eagles. Like, there's just a lot of, there's so many fun narratives. And I can't remember like where it's landed. I know that when he left, people were like, oh, he was just propped up by the players. He wasn't that liked. And I don't know, he's kind of been out of the public eye, I feel like, for the last 2 months, where at the beginning of the year, he was like a joke. I don't know, how do people feel about him in Philly?
Oh, not good at all. Not great.
So
there's a lot of, I forget what happened. There was a press conference right around the Super Bowl where he kind of made something up at the podium, I think, or people thought he did, and it created this whole issue with how he was perceived. I was at a Phillies game in May, actually, and someone came up to me. They're like, "Hey, man, you kind of look like Jonathan Gannon," and he laughed, and I laughed, and he said, I almost punched you in the face. Like, so I'm not sure if that's an insult to me or to him or who, but I thought that was hilarious. So not great are the vibes in Philly.
Dude, I mean, if you get Jonathan Gannon, I get Liam Hemsworth. It's kind of like a back and forth. Yeah. So the Cardinals play a ton of cover 4. That's where you have 4 deep in the secondary. It's the highest rate in the NFL, 34%. This year, Devonta Smith has crushed 2.58 yards per out run against cover 4. A.J. Brown has a 49% air yard share against cover 4. So both those guys are great plays. They have the exact same first read target percentage too. So it's like both of those guys feel like great options. I don't like playing both of them together because they're expensive. Devonta Smith is way cheaper on both sites, $1,300 on both. You save. So I don't know. I feel like their roster percentages will probably stay tame. And I think that if you just play a Jalen Hurts stack this week with those 2 players and then bring it back with T. McBee, I think you can do that this week.
Yeah, it's very clear how to play it, as you said, on the Cardinals side. It's Trey McBride, who is a wide receiver. And, since he really came on, he has, since I think it's week 8 is when he kind of took over for Zach Ertz as the dude. He's 12th in the league in targets per game, not tight ends, in the entire league. So you're getting a wide receiver that you can play in flex or tight end. I love Trey McBride this week.
Yeah. Leads the team in targets per out run, expected fantasy points per route run. He's just great. And then James Conner is interesting. I feel like he's just a low ceiling play. Like he'll show up in some cash conversations because he's below 6K, but I can't play them. The only thing I will say about this game on the Cardinals side is that we know that there's going to be volume and that Philly gives it up through the air. 39 pass attempts per game. They're on pace to face the 5th most pass attempts. Hold on. Pause for effect of all time. So you get some volume. Any interest in Kyler? Because he's like super below the radar on the slate. I could see a Kyler Trey McBride stack, and then you're bringing it back with 2 Philly guys like Swift and Brown, or Swift and Devonta Smith, and you get there. Like this game goes off. It's back and forth. We've seen Philly have trouble with teams they're supposed to put away too.
Yeah, they have. And I could see the Cardinals hanging around for a little bit longer than people think. Kyler's tough, man. I mean, the matchup's obviously incredible, but he really hasn't had an incredible ceiling performance. He only has had, I don't even want to say great, but good games when he has a rushing score. So like you need him to run for 1, probably run for 50 yards and at least throw 1 touchdown. Could have happened in this matchup, obviously, but it's not a place that I definitely want to attack aggressively, especially because when you look at the options to have with him, it's kind of limited, right? It's Trey McBride and who else?
Nobody else. Nobody else should be. Let me ask this question. This is the Kyle Mean question of the week. Should any of the Cardinals players, wide receivers, be on an NFL roster? And wide receivers. And I know Hollywood should. He should not be on an NFL roster.
Whenever he gets a chance, he produces.
He's Elijah Moore. He just gets cheap wide receiver dinky PPR targets.
Greg Dortch is going to break the slate. Just watch it.
He's fine for what he is, but I mean, like Michael Wilson, no. Rondale is one of the most hilarious picks of all time. Like, there's just so many things about the Cardinals that probably a year or 2 from now, this is just going to look like a very different team. And hopefully we get to talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. next year for the Cardinals. So give me your Vegas pick.
I will take Philly over 29.5 points for their team total.
That's probably the right call. 48.5. It's a good total. Like I could see it hitting the over. And just to give you some numbers, guys, like when the total's between 46.5 and 49, those actually do correlate to hitting over because it's at the right spot. It's the 50 ones that don't go so well. So I don't mind taking the over in this game. I think there's enough pieces here to go back and forth. Philly defense isn't good. We know the Arizona defense isn't good too. All right, we have a bonus game. Usually we go through 3 games, but Betz pounded the table, said we have to talk about the New Orleans Saints at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's an important game in the NFC South. Notice we're not talking about the Falcons in the NFC South because they're the worst. So, over-under is 43. Tampa Bay is 2.5-point home favorites. Both quarterbacks feel tempting, but I also see them just being meh options. Like, can Derek Carr or Baker Mayfield break a slate? I feel like based on the other options we've talked about, I just won't be going there, but I like correlating pieces in this game.
Yeah, me too. And that's really what I wanted to talk about, is specifically the Saints side of the ball. You have to throw on Tampa. I mean, that's just what teams do, right? Every single week. They are facing the fourth most pass attempts per game are the Bucs. So I like the spot that we could see elevated play volume as far as the pass attempts for Derek Carr. Will he be efficient with them? I have no idea. But I just wanted to point this out for people so that they don't look at box scores and kind of get stuck on, well, last time he faced the Bucs, he was terrible and everyone on their team was terrible. Well, it's true because Derek Carr was battling the shoulder injury on a short week. Now he's healthy. We saw it last week against the Rams. 9.4 ADOT for Derek Carr last week was one of his highest on the year. So if that happens again, and you get this matchup, good things are going to happen for Chris Olave and or Rashid Shaheed. So to me, it's more just I encourage people to play, get overweight the field exposure to Olave and or Rashid Shaheed in the spot. I'm not sure I'll play Derek Carr. Yeah, again, it kind of feels like the upside isn't there, but he randomly has these 300-yard games in him, and if he throws for 2 or 3 scores, certainly it could work. So I think he's okay, but I really just want to point out the wide receivers are in an awesome spot.
Yeah, and I need to add Alvin Kamara as a wide receiver. He's 7,500 on both sites, which means on FanDuel, he's too cheap. Last time these two teams played in week 4, the Buccaneers won handily. He had 13 receptions. Now, I ignore the part that it was for 33 yards, but 13 receptions makes us take notice. Yeah, I love Olave. I love Shaheed. They're both great options this week. So, any interest in Rachaad White?
Not really. It feels
like
unfair.
It's the same answer every week.
No. I've played some Rachaad White. He's been good. There's nothing negative to say about him. It's just that when he's 7,600 on DraftKings and Kyren Williams is right there for not that much more, I'm going to find the money to play Kyren Williams, even though he'll be popular. It's just game environment. Like the total on this one isn't awesome. I just think someone's going to get there from the Saints side, and then, from the Saints side, and then on the Tampa side, really, New Orleans has been good, not great defensively. They will not have Marshawn Lattimore again this week. So to me, it's more of a wide receiver spot if you are going to go there. I'm not too into Rachaad White, even though he's been great.
Can you play a Carr double stack with Olave and Shaheed?
Yeah, why not? It's cheap. I think you can.
Okay. Yeah, it almost, I feel like sometimes I look at these matchups and I go, I feel like I have to pick one or the other. When, Shaheed catches one bomb, which we've seen him do, and Olave has another game where he gets the volume, they both can get there, and that's a pretty cheap double stack that you can bring it back with Evans or Godwin and go on from there and then spend up at other games. So I am totally for that. I think I like the over.
Interesting. I also like the over.
Okay. Let's go to our slate breakers. Betz and I are going to talk about one player. It's week 17, and I feel like we've been on a pretty good little hot streak of talking about these guys. Last week, I believe I talked about Justin Jefferson. You brought up Mike Evans. We got some big games from our guys. So this week, our slate breaker is brought to you by this RX bar that I have right in front of me because I didn't have a sponsor. Dang it.
Well, you gonna eat that right after we're done or what?
Well, it's mixed berry, and it is one of my favorites.
Oh, you like the mixed berry?
Yeah, mixed berry is also a Pam Beasley favorite, if you remembered. So, shout out to Pam.
Okay. Brought to you by The Office, brought to you by RX Bars.
Give me your slate breaker.
We just talked about it, man. I'm going Chris Olave. I think one of these guys goes off. It's such an unbelievable spot. Tampa Bay, 29th in schedule adjusted points. 2 wide receivers. We already talked about it. You have to throw on Tampa. Their top corner, Carlton Davis, is in concussion protocol. They have given up massive stat lines to wide receivers recently. Brandon Ayuk, 156 yards. Pity City, 107. Drake London, remember him a couple weeks ago? 172. Dontavian Wicks, 97 yards. Calvin Ridley last week, 690 and 2. One of these guys is going bonkers. I want to bet on Chris Olave this week.
Be all that you can be, Chris Olave. Please just be everything that I've ever dreamed of you, that I've ever thought of.
We need you.
This is it. Please. I love Chris Olave. Please be great. Mine is Kyren Williams, running back, Los Angeles Rams. And my note is pay up. You're going to have to pay up for this guy. And I think he's just as good a play of CMC. Now, the team applied total isn't the same, but matchup-wise, role-wise, he's great. And he is popping in Marv's model, meaning if you go in the DFS pass, we have our fantasy expectation report. Kyren Williams, let me just ask you this, Betz. Since returning from IR, has he been good or great for fantasy bets? What would you say?
He's been great.
He's been great. In half-point leagues, RB1, 9, 18, 5, and 11, 26.6 opportunities per game. If you knew on DraftKings that someone was getting 27 opportunities per game, what should they be priced as?
What's Christian McCaffrey's price?
$9,600.
They should be that.
Yeah, they should be super expensive. Kyren Williams is not only cheaper, but according to the model, he's actually underachieved when it comes to fantasy points over expectation over the last 5 weeks. So what does that tell you?
Means you got to play him.
You got to play this guy. So I am going to be over the moon for Kyren Williams this week. The Giants have allowed the third most rushing touchdowns in the league. Yeah, I think Kyron's just going to go bonkers this week, so I will be overweight the field with him. One more segment.
Prop it like it's hot.
If you want to get all of our picks, you can get them in the DFS Pass, our props and props alerts channel in the Discord. And Betz and I are going to hit you with a couple that we think you need to. So stay with the theme, Chris Olave.
Yeah, I wanted to come on and give like a different take, but just the number doesn't make sense to me. It's 66.5 yards. Let's go over. We're going to take it over, Kyle, because it's week 17 on Chris Olave's receiving yards. Already talked about the matchup, the spot. The usage for him has been awesome. So no more to say, but we're going over 66.5 on Chris Olave.
I'm going to give another Falcons one, which I feel like I've been pretty tempered. We need to go back, but I'm pretty sure on my Falcons one, I've almost been 100% on them.
Yeah, your Falcons takes are usually very accurate.
Yes, and they're not usually like, this guy's going to go off. It's usually like, fade this guy, or don't play Van Jefferson. Just fade him everywhere. But this is on Bijan Robinson. We had a streak, I believe it was like 3 or 4 weeks in a row, where you and I kept taking the overs of Bijan Robinson, and I think the books forgot about it. Because right now, on FanDuel, his line is 22.5. On Underdog, it's 23.5. I like the over on both of those. And let me give you some context for this. His line for his receptions opened at 2.5. It's now at 3.5, okay? Now the over's at plus 110, plus 120, the under's at 3.5. So it seems like the books say 3 receptions is where the line is. This year, in games with 3+ receptions, Bijan Robinson has cleared this line in 9 of 9 games. So we love this line. And then Chicago also happens to allow the most running back receiving yards in the NFL. So it's a great combination of his floor, they're on the road, he gets the receiving work, and the matchup says that he's going to get a lot of. So that's my Falcons take of the day. Take it to the bank. I parlayed these two together right before the show.
Love that. That's fun.
Yeah, Underdog for the win.
Let's go.
If you want to play with us, go to ballersdfs.com or DraftKings League, Fantasy Footballers DFS, Borg and Betz. Betz and I are going to open up some fun contests, including a Saturday one for Dallas and Detroit, if you want to get in on that. So fill our contest, jump in. If you want to add a friend, it's free to do that, and then they can jump in the contest, whatever. But the league, there's always people winning tons of money, and even worse, taking our money. So make sure you're a part of that. ballersdfs.com. Betz, sign us off for the last time of 2023.
Yes. Apologies in advance for my terrible voice on the show. I'm dying. I need a drink and a nap, and I'll catch you guys next week. Enjoy the football. Enjoy Saturday night. Man, what a slate that's going to be. Detroit and Dallas, and then we got 13 games on this main slate. Good luck to you. We will see you on Tuesday.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com.